Imagine a network that can take you to and across clouds in minutes instead of months. A network where services like firewalls live and scale in the cloud. A network you don't build but draw. A network delivered as a service. Imagine a one-click cloud network. But for today's enterprises, the reality of cloud networking is very different. Too costly with upfront hardware investments. Too slow with tedious do-it-yourself configuration. Too complex with deep expertise needed for each and every cloud. The network must be reinvented for the cloud. Introducing the Alkira Cloud Services Exchange, the world's first unified multi-cloud network delivered as a service. At the heart of the Alkira CSX are Alkira Cloud Exchange points. CXPs are virtualized points of presence built in the cloud. Complete with a full routing stack and network services capabilities, CXPs deliver symmetric traffic steering for stateful network services, optimal routing to cloud with no data center backhaul, and establish a global transit network connecting multiple public clouds together. Your closest CXP provides a single point of onboarding into your global multi-cloud world. With Alkira, you can instantly connect your users and sites to the cloud and your clouds together. Easily insert and autoscale your on-demand network services like firewalls with intent-based policies. See more, govern better with end-to-end visualization of your entire multi-cloud network, and dramatically lower your cloud TCO with as-a-service consumption and zero upfront costs. Now you can design and provision your global multi-cloud network as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Register for service. 2. Visualize your network and network services on a design canvas. 3. Click the Provision button. Instantly, the Alkira solution connects your sites to and across clouds. Now watch your multi-cloud network come to life. Alkira, the network reinvented for cloud.
All right. Hello and welcome to this Alkira webinar. My name is David Klebanov. I lead product marketing for Alkira. Today with me, we have our co-presenter, Misbah Rehman, who leads our technical marketing. Misbah, you want to take a second, introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, David. Super excited to be part of this webinar. So yeah, I lead the technical marketing at Alkira, and we'll be helping you with this network services webinar.
Right. Awesome. All right. Yeah, so the topic of our webinar today is to really talk about the multi-cloud in general, and specifically talk about the network services and the network services architecture, which becomes a very acute point when organizations are embarking on the cloud adoption journey. Right. Now, here's the agenda for our webinar today. We're going to spend maybe a minute to give you a little bit of an introduction on Alkira, and then dive into this with different network services architectures, the ones that kind of predate the cloud, the other ones where the cloud happens, and then we have the traditional network services architectures. We're going to spend some time talking about that. And of course, most of the time, we're going to focus on the network services architectures for the cloud that we bring to the market as Alkira. Now, a couple of housekeeping items. You are more than welcome to ask questions. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We'll carve out some time at the end of this webinar to take some questions from the ones that you've been kind of asking. So we'll be monitoring the Q&A window. So with that said, let me introduce a couple of words about Alkira. For those of you who are not familiar with us, apologies. So Alkira was founded in May of 2018. So we're about 2 years old, right? We got very quickly funded within 6 weeks or so by Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, and GV, which is formerly known as Google Ventures. Total funding is around $30 million. We immediately started working with our customers. So we had obviously a lot of early interest in what we were doing. Our customers started coming in even late 2018 and obviously throughout the entire 2019. And then recently, last month, we launched the company kind of out there And that happened on April 15th, 2020. And that's when our website went live. And you, of course, you're more than welcome to go and visit our website at www.alkira.com. And our mission is really reinvent the networking for the cloud era. That's kind of our mantra. That's what we're after. We want to take a hard look at networking and network services and see how those change and morph in this cloud world. And obviously, there's quite a few things that need to be done differently in order for this cloud adoption to be successful. So as I mentioned in the beginning, let's spend a couple of minutes here talking about different cloud sort of network services architectures for the cloud, right? So for organizations, for the organizations that adopt the cloud and sort of treat cloud as its own isolated entity. So we say here it's a predating the cloud, but in fact the cloud has been with us for for a decade and a half, right? So it's not really predating the cloud, but rather treating a cloud as an outsider entity to the organizational IT control. So this is the environment where applications live in a cloud. However, they're not under the IT control. Now, most of the applications that are under IT control and under IT infrastructure reside in the data centers or potentially in the co-location facilities. Now, the connectivity to those places is done through a corporate network, right? There's nothing new in here. For applications that are internet-bound or internet-based, such as SaaS applications, the access to those is done through the data center. Now, many times the access to the applications dictates the positioning of the network services. So when the applications reside in a data center, obviously the network services are also positioned within the data center. And here we can talk about a slew of the different network services. Obviously, some of the most popular ones are firewalls, IPS, IDS, load balancers, DNS, DHCP, IPAM services. For applications residing in the data center, those services are oftentimes provisioned in the data center. For applications in the co-locations become the place where those network services live, or at least maybe the subset of those network services. For applications that reside in the internet, such as SaaS applications, of course, because the access to those applications is done through the data center, the services that reside in a data center, they also service those applications. So this is really kind of a traditional, old-fashioned view into this, right? Now, if we look at how these network services architectures have transitions and have morphed in order to accommodate the cloud, we can really talk about three different buckets of solutions. Right? And I'll walk you through each one of them, and we're going to have a separate slide for each one. So this is just kind of a sample of these three different approaches to the adopting the cloud connectivity and also inserting those network services. Now, on the left, you can see co-locations. It's a very popular option. It basically means an organization establishes a footprint for connectivity and for network services within different co-location facilities around the world, wherever the need exists. Private interconnects are oftentimes used. Those are the direct connects, the express route, the dedicated interconnects based if you're using AWS, Azure, or GCP. And the services are really resident in there, and the connectivity to the co-locations and to the clouds through the co-locations is done through a corporate network. Now, the second one is a cloud transits. That's where the architectures have morphed in order to accommodate these cloud transitions. And as applications move to the cloud, so are the network services. Now, the network services that are moving to the cloud has to be resident somewhere because they are in the cloud, but where are they in the cloud? And that introduces those cloud transit architectures. And those cloud transits are per cloud, and there can be more than one per cloud. But those are the cloud transits that host those network services. Again, the connectivity to those cloud transits is oftentimes done through the corporate network and different means of connectivity. We're going to touch upon that in a few minutes. And of course, the third approach is as a service approach, which is the approach of Alkira. And we're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about that. So we can just leave it at that. But it's an approach where you are consuming the cloud connectivity and the cloud network services as a service. So let's take a slightly deeper look into the co-location option, right? So again, this is the situation where the applications have moved to the public clouds. Co-locations are the anchor point to connect to those public clouds. Again, private means of connectivity oftentimes are used. Direct connects, express route, dedicated interconnects based on which cloud you're connecting to. The services are resident within those co-locations. And that's for the reason is that services have to be in a place where cloud is being accessed, and because cloud is being accessed through the co-locations, so that's the place where the services are. Many co-locations, many places to put your services in. For those environments that have adopted this direct internet access for accessing SaaS applications, that forces the services to be also resident at those remote locations. Those could be firewalls, IPS, IDS appliances, whatever it may be. They can be physical form, they can be virtual form, but it's a footprint of the network services within those remote sites if the local internet exit points are provisioned at those, right? Now, what are the challenges that people are encountering with this approach? And we really can talk about 3 different buckets of challenges. The first one is complexity. Now, as you can see, applications are residing in the cloud. The services are residing out of the cloud because they are residing in the co-location facilities. So that creates a situation where the traffic, the application traffic, the network traffic that requires this network services treatment has to be swinging in and out of the cloud in order to be processed within these co-locations by these network services. You can think about this approach as cloud on a stick. Imagine one AWS VPC needs to talk to another AWS VPC, or something a little bit more elaborate. One AWS VPC has to talk to one Microsoft Azure VNet. And insertion of a firewall into that communication requires the traffic to be drawn out of the cloud into the co-location through those direct interconnects and processed by these network services in order to go back into the cloud to reach its destination. That's what we mean by this cloud on a stick. You can imagine the level of inefficiencies that you will be incurring when you adopt an approach like that. Now, of course, in order for this network services and the network in general to operate in this environment, there's a pretty complicated set of routing that needs to happen in order to accommodate that. And that has to do with routing table virtualizations, with VRFs, multiple zones of the firewall, or multiple IPS appliances in order to accommodate that. So there's quite a lot of complexity that has to do with those services residing outside of the cloud. Again, because outside of the cloud, they're not leveraging those cloud efficiencies as far as the provisioning cycles. That brings us to the second point of how long it takes to provision them. And the cost of investing capital investments in the co-location provisioning, in the provisioning of those dedicated interconnect, in provisioning and deploying those network services that many times are physical appliances within the colo. And if you're provisioning services in the branch locations, that expands it even further. So all of that carries a high cost mark. Now let's look at the second approach of the cloud transit, where we can see organizations are improving on the traditional architectures by saying is that the applications that have moved into the cloud are also forcing the move of the network services into the cloud, which obviously brings a level of efficiency because now the services can be co-resident with the applications within the cloud. Now, sounds interesting, right? Where are those services going to be hosted? There's multiple places where they can be hosted. They can be hosted in each individual VPCs and VNets, but many times we're seeing those services are being placed in cloud transits, and those can be transit VPCs, transit VNets, or they could be attached to the TGW in case of AWS, right? Now, there's a couple of points to consider in here. And again, we're talking about 3 ones that we want to bring up is the symmetry, performance, and operations and cost. Sending the traffic through those network services that are now located within the cloud, right, within multiple cloud transits, potentially multiple cloud transits within the same cloud, introduces a great amount of complexity, especially when that steering of the traffic to those services is done based on routing controls. Some organizations have worked around that by employing an active standby approach or by leveraging network address translation in order to force the symmetric traffic flow through those services. Though all of those significantly complicate the environment. Now further, If you are considering multiple cloud transit, which is often the case because clouds are distributed by nature, those multiple cloud transits that are hosting those network services, the traffic that goes through those cloud transits and those network services has to be daisy chained, so to speak, in order to keep the symmetry. So imagine cloud transit 1 that has a firewall, cloud transit 2 that has a firewall. Now I need to traverse both cloud transits in order to reach from source to destination. And you can imagine that in order to keep the symmetry, using just route-based approaches, I have to traverse that firewall twice, once in Cloud Transit A and once in Cloud Transit B, right? So there's a level of inefficiencies that have to do with symmetry. Now, those services many times are leveraging cloud-native constructs for traffic steering, and that's when the cloud-native limitations come up as far as, for example, tunneling performance or things like that, right? So the performance becomes another complicated set of sort of attributes that need to be catered to in addition to symmetry. Now, of course, all of that boils down to complicated operations and the cost that has been spent to stand up these architectures, and they're all heterogeneous in nature because each cloud is different. So once you've deployed a solution in a single cloud and you want to expand to maybe a different region of the same cloud or even go further to a different cloud, all of that becomes a compounding effect and turns operation and cost into a big item. So as you can see, cloud really introduces challenges to this traditional network services architecture, which is where we understand that something needs to be done differently, right? And that's when enter the world of Alkira. So I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about this slide, and then I'm going to hand it over to Misbah to carry on the conversation about some of the details. So what we have created at Alkira is we've created this notion of what we call a cloud services exchange, an Alkira Cloud Services Exchange, which is this unified multi-cloud network. Think about this as a multi-cloud network service that is delivered to you as a service and incorporates the elements of intelligent network connectivity, on-demand traffic steering for network services, full visibility and governance. So there's a lot of kind of elements that we have embedded within the Cloud Services Exchange that make this as a service approach very sort of appealing. Now, as a customer, what you connect to the Cloud Services Exchange is you connect your remote sites, your remote users, potentially your SD-WAN environments, if that's what you have, and at the same time you connect your public clouds, public cloud instances, different regions and instances in different regions of the same cloud, your internet and SaaS exit points. So everything sort of that is in your inventory as far as what requires connectivity and requires network services. All of that is connected to the Alkira Cloud Services Exchange through what we call Alkira Cloud Exchange points, which are virtual multi-cloud points of presence that are globally distributed and allow you really quick and easy onboarding into your entire multi-cloud environment. Right? There's a couple of attributes that you can see on top and that are important as part of our solution. As first and foremost is a very intuitive digital design canvas that allows you to express your intent, and then with a single press of a button, with a single click of a mouse, with a single API call, to implement and to provision that intent onto the global virtual infrastructure that we have provided for you and that you can consume as a service. I mentioned connectivity. We obviously, on top of connectivity, provide you this advanced network services marketplace where you can choose the services that you want to deploy out of this marketplace, and we will make sure that those services are deployed, instantiated, monitored, managed. The traffic is steered to them based on policies. So all of that is part of this as a service approach. Things like end-to-end segmentation are inherently built within the solution. So is the day two operations for this as a service approach. And ultimately, we want to make sure that you have a full transparency as far as how the service is being charged for, and also have an ability to perform a chargeback, which is extremely important for the IT organizations not to become basically sort of the bearer of the entire expense for multi-cloud adoption, and we provide very meaningful tools in order for the chargeback to occur and for an IT organizations to become more sort of financially viable. So having said that, I think that gave you a little bit of an introduction as far as where we've been, where we are. So I want to transition to Misbah, and Misbah really, want you to take us through some of those things that I've mentioned, and talk more in detail about the network services architectures for this cloud solution.
Sure. Thanks, David. So let me see if I got the control and I can move the slides.
Yep.
So so in the next few slides, I'm going to double click into 3 different aspects of the solution. First of all, we'll talk about the Alkira's network services security architecture, the challenges posed by the current network security architecture when it comes to cloud, and how we are helping our customers to consolidate and standardize this network security architecture for both on-prem and cloud network. So if you look at it from a cloud perspective, the options that we have in terms of securing our workload inside the cloud are pretty much like setting up security groups, network ACL, that basically protects our workload that are running inside the VNets and the VPCs. When it comes to on-prem, we can have our firewall appliances with stateful firewall inspection, and then we can also offer advanced security services on those. So basically the net of this is that you will end up having 2 different types of security architecture, one that is working inside the cloud and one that is working inside the on-prem. To help things out here, what firewall vendors did that they came up with their VM appliances for their cloud. So now you can actually spin up the firewall services as a VM inside any of these clouds, which definitely help the enterprises in the sense that now the enterprises can have the same, let me go back. Okay, sorry. So it actually helped the enterprises some way, because now with the VM appliances, you can at least have the same type of device that is running both on-prem or and also in the cloud. Plus, you can manage it with the same management tools and the systems. But the problem is all these VM appliances that are running inside the cloud are still running on top of the cloud infrastructure. You can spin up those VM appliances, but from the connectivity perspective, from the cloud limitation perspective, you still have to build your architecture that still needs to be limited because of all the stuff that the cloud native solution or the cloud native construct has to offer. Like, to prove my point, for instance, in terms of the cloud architecture that are based on these firewall VMs, you will end up needing some kind of transit VNet, VPC, or TGW, or any other kind of transit connectivity options that the cloud has to offer. You have to steer your traffic using cloud native construct to these firewalls and back. And then basically when it comes to expanding this network to across different regions, the network itself becomes so complex that it basically becomes impossible to manage and operationalize. And at the same time, you do not get the same level of feature and functionality that you get it on-prem. Like, for example, a concept like as basic as segmentation, which we are all used to doing on the on-prem side of the things. We are used to putting our stuff into VRFs so that we can securely isolate the traffic from the get-go. And that concept, like segmentation, is not possible in cloud, because the problem is that if you want to achieve segmentation, your architecture will become super complex. At the same time, if you want to extend multiple circuits into the cloud for each segment, it becomes too costly. So what enterprise did is they end up having one flat cloud network. And then on the infrastructure side, on the on-prem side of the things, they'll have some kind of route leaking into each segment to make sure that they are maintaining the segmentation, at least on the on-prem side of the things. So the thing is, even though you have the same devices running in both the networks from an on-prem and a cloud perspective, but from an architecture perspective, the feature and functionality perspective, you still have 2 different types of network running for on-prem and cloud. So what we did at Alkira when we were working on integrating these network security services, that we wanted to make sure that we fully understand the requirements from a security perspective. And those security requirement needs to flow through from on-prem into the cloud alike. Whatever you get it on-prem, you should be able to get the same functionality in the cloud as well. And plus, at the same time, we do not want to offer these kind of services at the compromising the simplicity, because simplicity and ease of use is in the DNA of the solution. So everything that we are going to provide should come with simplicity and ease of use. So what we have done here, like as you see on the slide itself, that there is this whole box of segment. So anything that we basically add into our portal or add into the Alkira network, the building block from the get-go is the segment. So any connector, whether it's on-prem, whether it's cloud, whether you are terminating an internet connection or extranet for that matter, it becomes part of the segment. You can create multiple segments and they will be isolated from the get-go. And the way that the segment will flow through inside the service, it's done automatically out of the box. From a user perspective, in order to maintain this segmentation end-to-end, you do not have to do anything. You just have to define your intent that these are my workloads that are part of this particular segment. And as part of the service, they become that a part of that segment, and that segment flows end-to-end. What we have also heard from the customers is that segment is not enough in terms of like grouping different services together, because inside the segment, this can be all part of this one enterprise segment, but we can have different types of connectivity. Like for instance, I can terminate my on-prem sites, I can terminate my cloud workloads, I can terminate internet or extranet or some partner network. So the point is that there is another level of granularity that was needed in order to simplify the policies. So on the left side, for instance, what you see, the intranet, which is the on-prem sites, on the right side is the cloud side. So this basically gave rise to another concept that we have inside the Alkira service offering, is the group and the zone stuff. So basically inside the segment, you have the ability to define groups and the zones, and you can define your policies based on your business outcomes. Like for instance, traffic coming in from the on-prem, I want a particular type of a policy that needs to be applied when it talks to internet. When it talks to cloud, I want a completely different policy. So I can group these similar construct into a group and apply those policies based on the rules that I want to define and what type of traffic I want to allow. So basically, this is all done through our Alkira intent-based policy framework. And this is like, the point is, it's as simple as defining your intent. What do you want? And with a simple single line of policy, it is applied across the board, across your entire network. We can actually steer the traffic using the 6-tuple. We can also do it based on the application matching. And it's pretty flexible, that anything that you can be able to define to steer your traffic. So the outcome of it is that we provide you an enterprise-grade security architecture. We can integrate these security services for cloud and on-prem alike. And it's done with a very simplistic approach through our Alkira intent-based policy framework.
So Misbah, you're basically saying is that the segmentation is a great tool to separate things around, but what we're providing here is something I can think about as a micro-segmentation that allows me to further subdivide those segments into those security zones in order to facilitate firewall security policy.
Exactly. Like you can go as granular based on your business outcomes.
All right.
So the next use case that I want to cover here is the secure SaaS and internet access. Before I cover this use case, I want to just revert back to the history slide that David was talking about, where we can have an architecture where we can have a data center as an exit point. We can implement firewall policies there to actually access the internet in a secure fashion. That architecture worked really well and was one of the more popular architecture when it comes to the enterprise networks. But as SaaS starts to become a reality, those architecture won't work anymore for the enterprises. Because the point is, the building block of the SaaS architecture is to be more distributed. They want these SaaS workloads to be closer to the user. They build the CDN architecture where they want to basically make sure that the user gets to it as soon as possible, as soon as it hits the internet. Now, looking at that architecture and marrying it with the Alkira architecture, they fit very well with each other, because what you have been seeing us talking about this architecture of CXPs is these CXPs are globally distributed. They are globally distributed across all the different regions. And the point is that we want the users, the cloud workloads, the data center to be terminated to the closest CXP. And again, as I was talking about the SaaS architecture, it exactly aligns with that. So what we do here is that we provide the ability for the users to terminate closest to the closest CXP, provide that enterprise grade security and firewall services at that CXP, and provide you an access point, the exit point into the SaaS application for optimized SaaS exit. So with this simplistic architecture with intent-based policies, you can simply terminate any of your workloads to the CXP and basically make sure that you get the optimized, secure exit into the SaaS application. And everything, again, is segment aware. You can have different policies for each internet exit or SaaS exit for different types of segment. And basically, it basically done at the segment and based on the intent-based policy. So basically the net is optimal SaaS performance with the uncompromised security that you are getting here.
You know, what I really like about this, Misbah, if you can go back one
Sure.
slide. What I really like about this is that this sort of a balanced approach to where those security services are being inserted is that you don't want to put them all in a data center, because we talked about that that's like very inefficient. We certainly may not want to put them in every single remote location, because that becomes operationally challenging and expensive. So I think that what we offer, this sort of a balanced approach of having those services reside in this as a service, delivered solution. I think that kind of strikes a tone with many customers. Is that what you're seeing with customers you're interacting?
Yeah, definitely. I think in addition to what you were talking about is the point that I made, that like if you look at the SaaS architecture, like based on the CDNs and everything, right? This is exactly the architecture for this next era or the cloud era that we are talking about. Our stuff, like from a security perspective, as we were talking about, that you do not need to backhaul the traffic, you do not need to have security at each remote sites and all that. You have these points closest to the user, you terminate there. You are still getting the enterprise grade security, plus at the same time, you are not compromised on the performance when it comes to SaaS.
Right. Cool.
So the next one I want to talk about is zero touch auto scaling. So again, if you look at the cloud, the way the cloud changed the game is it lets you configure the resources when and where you needed it. You do not have to statically set up your infrastructure. You do not have to statically build your data center or compute resources. You just come and consume it in a pay-as-you-go fashion and just use it when and where you wanted it. This is great from a compute and storage perspective and other application perspective. But if you double click into this from an infrastructure perspective, for the most part, SaaS is still static, because if I want to build my network infrastructure, I want to build connectivity into different regions of the cloud. What I need is I still have to build my network for a peak usage because I cannot just set up that, okay, I'm setting it up for my average use, and when the peak hits, my network will start to fall apart. So even like everything is very dynamic. You can do consume the resources in a pay-as-you-go fashion. But when it comes to infrastructure, things were pretty static. So from an Alkira perspective, since we are built in the cloud, we are built for the cloud, we wanted to make sure that from an infrastructure element perspective, we follow the same principle as well. And we deliver that services for infrastructure as well in an as a service form. So what we are doing here is, from a network services perspective, We give the ability to our customers where at the time of provisioning, they can define the minimum and the maximum number of resources that they need. And this is again purely based on their utilization, based on their planning, the way that they have seen the patterns in their network, that this is the minimum amount, minimum usage I see at a particular time. This is the max, this is the average that I see. So based on those numbers, simply at the time of provisioning, they can define those numbers. Once they define those numbers, what we'll do is we'll start off with the minimum number of resources that are needed. And then we will proactively and constantly monitor the traffic that are going through those services. And basically on demand, making sure when we needed it, we will spin up those resources automatically so that make sure that your network does not fall apart. You're still getting an optimized, secure connectivity into their workloads, whether it's going from sites to the internet, whether it's going site to the cloud or cloud to cloud. So now you have these optimized, secure connectivity. At the same time, you are efficiently utilizing your cost as well. Because in a static setup, if you're building it for your peak utilization, you will end up having resources where you are just have those resources up so that your network does not fall apart and you are paying unnecessarily for those resources, considering most of the time you don't need it. So in this case, this is again done out of the box as a service construct where you do not have to manage the life cycle complexity of these firewalls. These are all done automatically. When it comes to spinning up multiple firewalls, as network engineers, we all know that symmetry is a key term, right? And David, you also mentioned it in your earlier slides. So here from a symmetry perspective, we will make sure again out of the box that whatever flow that is entering into the Alkira network, we will automatically detect which firewall it's basically entered into the system, and on the way out, we will make sure that it exit out from the same system, from the same firewall. What it does is it basically makes sure that we do not have to do any workarounds like NAT that they were talking about in order to maintain symmetry. It's basically done on the actual source destination, and it's done intelligently from the service. So the last slide that I'm going to cover is the multi-cloud network visibility. So as we talked about the network architecture, that they are two disjoint architecture, the story is no different when it comes to operations and operational visibility as well. On the on-prem side of the things, we are typically used to SNMP traps, network flow logs, basically punting to our monitoring tools. While on the cloud side, we have to depend on the cloud native solutions that somehow, some way integrate into the monitoring tools. So again, the idea here is that you have two different solutions for visibility, for management, for operations. And what we have heard from customers that in the end, since they are two disjoint solutions, you still end up having blind spots when the interconnectivity of these solutions or these two networks are involved. So since we are doing this approach where we are connecting the two worlds seamlessly, the cloud world and the on-prem world, we wanted to make sure that we provide a one unified way from a visibility perspective where we can provide one pane of glass for the operations team to manage their entire infrastructure alike, not having to worry about that for cloud, I have to have another tool, for on-prem, I have to have another tool. This tool itself inherently will give you the infrastructure health, like for instance, if there is on-prem devices, how those physical devices connecting into the network, we'll be doing keep alives to those to make sure they are up and running. Similarly, on the cloud side of the things as well, we are going to monitor it. And again, basically present it through a single pane of glass. We can also monitor the application usage and throughout your network. So we can give you a snapshot where how your applications are being consumed inside the network for on-prem and cloud. And then you can actually drill down into a particular region to see if there's a, how a particular region is using a particular application. And then we can down to an individual connector to an individual flow level. So there is again, a lot of granularity, a lot of ways that you can actually look at it. And it can, excuse me, it can basically help you in order to have a high-level snapshot to just look at it, how your network looks like and how it's being consumed. And then for planning purposes, you can go drill down to an individual connector level to see if there is a need to upgrade your bandwidth or anything inside your network. And again, the rest of the stuff we talk about, we also show you the network utilization, services, and many more. The idea here is that since this is the service offers the seamless connectivity in the same way from a visibility perspective, we wanted to offer one tool which is good, which is an enterprise grade, which works well for both the on-prem and cloud, and leaving no blind spots for you to manage. You will have the entire end-to-end visibility into your network. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David to just walk us through the key takeaways and talk about the next steps. David, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Misbah. That was very, very insightful. Right. So a couple of key takeaways for things that we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes or so. Right. Things for you to remember is one-click provisioning. Right. I mentioned that when I first introduced the Alkira Cloud Services Exchange. I did mention that everything we do is done on the intuitive design canvas and provisioned with a single click of the button, the single API call that really allows you to build this sort of a smarter network for the cloud. We spent a lot of time today talking about security, right? That was the topic of our conversation as far as network services are concerned, and one of the representative network services that we used is security. But of course, we didn't spend time talking about other network services. But I did mention the network services marketplace, which has more than just security services. We're talking about the whole slew of network services, right? But for security purposes, we're really talking here about replicating this enterprise-grade security that people are used to deploy in their on-prem environment, and replicating this enterprise-grade security into the cloud and multi-cloud environments. The intelligence that comes with steering the traffic, which requires a level of symmetry, and how that can be achieved in a global environments, be that in a single or a multi-cloud environment. So the intelligence that Alkira solution has for this asymmetric traffic steering, the high capacity that can be achieved through automatically scaling the network services. And we call this a zero-touch autoscaling, is that you set this in motion and the autoscaling happens based on the capacity demands that your applications exhibit in the cloud environment. And at the end, just like Misbah mentioned before this, that the operational excellence that comes with the full visibility and governance that is included within the Alkira as a service offering for the cloud and the multi-cloud environments. So at the end of the day, we started off with that, and I guess we'll repeat that again, is that our mission statement is to reinvent the networking for the cloud era, and to be able to really help the enterprises, the organizations, the enterprises to uplift their environments into the cloud in a way that is not compromising on the feature richness of connectivity and the feature richness of network services, and specifically the network services architectures that we talked about today, right? Now, Q&A, I know we kind of ran a little bit over, so I know there's been questions coming in. So I think that what we're going to do is we're going to address those questions individually with each one of you. We really appreciate the questions that have been flowing in. There's quite a lot of them. We've been monitoring those. We'll make sure to go back and follow up with you on anything that is of a further interest, right? So as far as the next steps are concerned, we invite you all to visit our website at www.alkira.com, where you can learn more about our solution, where you can request a demo that you can kind of test run and test drive the Alkira solution. And if you're ready to make the step into the multi-cloud networking with services, visibility, and governance, obviously we invite you to go and register for the Alkira service, and very easily done on the alkira.com website. Now, stay tuned for more. On June 2nd, we are releasing a very exciting podcast that we have recorded with packet pushers. And in that podcast, you'll be able to hear enterprise and cloud architects who are our customers that discuss their cloud needs and their cloud challenges and how they really kind of leverage the power of Alkira in order to provide solution for their connectivity, network services, visibility needs. It's a pretty cool podcast. I think I invite everybody to access that, download that when it becomes available. I think it's going to be very valuable for a lot of you to see how our customers are realizing the value of what we're bringing to market. With that said, I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank my co-presenter, Misbah. Thank you very much for being part of that. And we invite you, we invite you to stay tuned and follow us more and join our future webinars. Thank you very much.